In the summer of 2011, Clover introduced their Kanzashi flower makers. There were 3 styles, each with 2 sizes, and they were an instant hit. Everyone wanted them, and they were all the rage. Fast forward to May 2012, and there are 2 brand new flowers, each again with 2 sizes. Today we're going to take a look at them and get creative making some wonderful fabric flowers. What you see here is a flower made from one each of the new templates. Clover is calling them Orchid and Daisy, and these round petals are what they're calling the Orchid, and this is the Daisy, and here are the templates that make them. Now I know you might be wondering how these are different, if at all, from the original set of 6 templates, 3 each with 3 designs with 2 sizes each. And here's the original pointed version, here's the original round petal version, and here's the original gathered petal version. Now, the only one of these that's actually close is the original round versus the daisy, and we'll talk about that in a second. But as you can see, this is our large and small daisy, and these are the other 2 from the original set, and these are very different. So if you're wondering, do I really need these? Well, the answer is if you like this style flower, then the answer would be yes. So we have those that are new, those 2 daisies. Now again, here's our original round template from summer of 2012 that was released. And here is, I'm going to take this button off, here is our new Orchid. And what you can see by looking is, first of all, the inside of this petal is very flat. The inside of the new Orchid has multiple gathers in it, so it makes a very different looking petal. And what I think that's very interesting is if you look at the back of this, the original round petal version, the back didn't make a very pretty flower, at least not in my opinion, but if you look at this new Orchid version, you could in fact, we'll stick that button on there for the sake of argument, you could in fact use it as the front of the flower if you chose to. So do you need these? As I said, if you like the shapes and the styles of these flowers, then you absolutely do. Now here's a little version, and I've just stuck this mother of pearl button on, it's not glued on yet, but there's a little version of our new Orchid template, and it's just darling. It's really small, it's 2 inches in diameter like all of the small versions are, but it's a really pretty little flower. Next we're going to show you how you can just easily put these together and make your flowers. 5 petals on the Orchid and 10 petals on the Daisy. They make up quickly, and in no time at all you'll have a whole garden full of them. We're going to start with the large daisy, and Clover recommends that this is a 10 petal flower, but if you like more or if you like less, of course you can do that. But for the sake of argument for this first time around, we'll go ahead and follow the directions. I've made 1 petal already, and the directions as Clover write them talk about a knot on the end, which I have here, and I've left myself a good tail because I'll want something that I can work with later on. And they tell you that the right side of the petal would be the side where your knot is on the left. So this is the right side of the petal, and I'm going to show you how I made this. But what I want you to be aware of is once you get these all on and you want to be certain that they're all facing the same way, this is a pretty side of the petal too, and there's nothing that says that you can't flip this flower over and use either side, even what they call the back side, as the right side of the flower. So here's my fabric, and this template is done on the straight of the grain. So I cut a strip, and I like to do it this way. I put a fold in my fabric, slide the fold all the way down into the template, and snap it shut. Whatever side of the fabric is facing out will be the right side of the petal. So this is what you'll see on the outside of the petal. Once I get this done, take my scissors, and I'm just going to trim around this and trim off all this extra fabric. Put this to one side. Now, when you do this, you have to remember to get these all on the same way, and the way that you do that is by reading these templates. Both sides have numbers on them, but this is the back, and the front side is labeled, in this case on this large one, this large daisy, it's numbers 1 through 8. Number 1 is marked start, and number 8 is marked finish. And so though you'll always start in number 1, you have to be certain that your needle enters the fabric from the side that says start. And once you do that, it's just a question of following the numbered sequence on the template until you get to number 8, which is the end in this case. Okay, so now I have this at number 8. What I'm going to do is pop the template off, put that to one side, and I'm going to start pulling up on the thread. And you can see what happens is we begin to get the fabric tucking in this way, and as I pull, it's going to go in and tuck some more until it starts to form this petal. Now obviously this is going the wrong way, so I'll flip this over, and now that you can see that we have two petals with the same shape and the same look side by side. I'm going to repeat this 7 more times, and then when I get to the what would essentially be the 10th petal, we'll come back and I'll show you how you tie this off into a circle and make a completed flower. I have 9 petals in place, so now I'm going to stitch the 10th petal, and then I'll show you how to tie this all up into a flower. Again, I'm following the numbered sequence. I started with the number 1 on the side that said number 1 start, and I'm going to end on the side that says number 8 finish. Okay, just like before, I'm going to pull up my petal. And I've been sort of shaping these as I go along, just because I like to do it that way. And you can do some final shaping once this is all tied off into a circle. Okay, so I've got this more or less pulled up, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull my original tail out of the way. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to stitch all the way through this original petal. This is the way I do it. This is kind of what Clover recommends, but I do it just a little bit differently. This is sort of my own way, and you'll probably develop something that works for you as well. But again, I'm stitching all the way through that original petal, coming out on the other side, and now I'm going to pull this up, and you can see what this flower starts to look like. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stitch back through the other way, being careful obviously not to go in the exact same hole. And I want to come out so that my needle is very close to that knot. Alright, and here's where I'm going to use the original tail, which is why I suggested you leave a long enough one. I can actually start to pull on this now, and the flower will close up, and you can pull as much or as little as you want. I kind of like it this way, and then what you can do is you can tie a square knot. Now the reason that I go through and then back again is because you notice that I've let go of these threads as I start to tie this square knot, and this isn't popping apart. I've tried it other ways, and I find that the flower begins to open up before I can actually get the knot in place and secure, and I find that incredibly frustrating, so I don't do it that way. When I do this, when I tie the second half of the square knot, I'm going to actually wrap my thread around twice rather than once. That's kind of a modified surgeon's knot, and this is just going to make certain that that knot stays in place. And you can see here's now our 10-petal daisy, and as I mentioned earlier, the back side is just as pretty as the front, and how you decide to finish this and which side you decide to use is really up to you, but the sky is pretty much the limit. And we'll talk about finishing, but before we do that I want to show you how to make the orchid, because again you have to work on the bias in order to get those petals properly formed. Let's make an orchid. This is the template, and it's easy to distinguish from all the others because it's round. It's the only round template that Clover makes in this Kanzashi line. As I said earlier, this template, in order to get these petals to be formed correctly, you have to work on the bias. If you don't, I did this and I know because I didn't read the directions first, but if you don't, you're not going to get a nice curved edge here. You're going to end up with something that doesn't look very pretty. So when you work on the bias, this is a regular piece of fabric. This is the lengthwise grain, and you can tell because here's the selvage edge with the printing about the information of the fabric, and this is going to be the crosswise grain. This is the crosswise grain. So to get the bias, I'm going to fold this up and we're going to work on this edge here. And basically what we're doing is we're creating a 45-degree angle. Now, in order to be reasonably economical with the fabric, I try not to fold up any more than I need, and this is really way too much and I don't want to waste that. So I'm going to back my fold down until I get to a point, oops, where I don't drop that into my lap. Alright, that looks pretty good. So I've got my fold just like before. We're going to tuck this into the template, snap it in place, and then I'm going to cut this out. Okay. Once again, I have my needle. I've got a fairly good length of thread on there, and I have a knot here, and I've left myself a nice long tail. This template is also numbered 1 through 8, so again, number 1 will be the start, number 8 is the finish, and you want to make certain that you start on the side where the number 1 is marked start. And just like before, pull this up, we're going to stitch through this, oops, following the numbered stitch pattern. You'll notice that there's writing on the back here. What Jess and I have done is actually written Clover's number. In this case, this is 8487, and it's the large orchid, and we wrote a note that it has to go on the bias. That way, if I lose track of the directions, I know that this one has to go on the bias, I know which number this is, and I know that it makes the large orchid. Again, I'm going to stitch through the numbered pattern here. Couldn't possibly be any easier. Clover's done a really nice job with these, made it so simple and so easy to be accurate and to just do this. Alright, I'm going to pop this off, and then I'm going to start pulling this up. And you can see that this pulls around, and that's what forms the curved edge of this petal, and that's why this has to be on the bias, because you need this give that's inherent on that 45-degree angle. And again, as before, you'll take this petal and you can mess with it a little bit to shape it and to get those folds in place. Now, I'm not going to spend time doing that. You don't need to see me do that. But one of the things that I find interesting with this particular one is that if you pull this really tightly, oops, pulling from the wrong end of the thread does not work. If you pull this really tightly, you can actually get a more elongated petal. And if you choose to do this, you can make a flower that looks very different than the one on the packaging, and certainly very different from this. This is one that I made earlier, and you can see that it's got the petals and it's got these pleats that make this the unique orchid style. But you see the difference here with these. Now this is a very long, pointy or pointier petal, whereas this is very curved and very round. And if you chose to put multiple on here, greater than the 5 that Clover suggests, you can get an entirely different look. You're going to finish this the same way that we showed you in the last segment. Take your 5, put them on, get them all formed, tie your knot as I showed you a moment ago, so you get your piece and your flower looks like this, and you have assembled with your 5 petals. And then in the next segment we're going to take a look at some options for flower centers. Now let's talk about ways that you can finish your flowers. These are examples made with the original group of Kanzashi flower making templates. The process is the same, the options are certainly just as unlimited. You can do things like stack one smaller flower onto another. You can use one of the Melissa Francis brooches. You can use one of our manufactured opals, and I've surrounded it with some rhinestone chain. This is a check glass button. This is another check glass button. This is a Melissa Francis brooch that I stacked on top of a big mother of pearl button. There's lots of different things that you can do. Here's my original sample that I made that you saw at the beginning of the video. Now, I really like this. It's pretty and it's simple, and what I'm going to do is I think I'm just going to actually put this check glass button on it. I really like this look. I like the iridescent colors in the button. I think it matches this really well. When I do this, I'm going to use Aileen's super thick tacky glue. It's really thick and it dries pretty quickly. And I'm going to, now these buttons, obviously like most buttons, have some sort of a means of attaching it. And in this case, it's a shank. All I'm going to do is put this on my mat, and I'm going to push until that shank bends over. It's far easier than trying to remove them. They don't get in the way. You just give it a push. Now what I'm going to do is take some of this glue and I'm going to feed it into the back side of the button. And I'm not going to push it all the way to the edge. When I place this button down on top of the flower, it's actually going to push the glue out to the edge, and I don't want it to seep out behind. So now I'm just going to press this down, give it a good push to know that it's seated and in place, and that's it. You really don't need to do any more. This is a flower that Jess made earlier. This too is the daisy, but this is the smaller version. She took a piece, glue on my finger. She took a piece of wool felt that was cut out with pinking shears and a larger mother of pearl button and just a little glass chip bead, and she attached the 3 layers on this way. She sewed these 3 pieces together and then the whole piece was glued to the flower. This is the small white orchid, and I think I'm going to use this simple little mother of pearl button on the center. I'll probably put some sort of a bead to cover the holes in the button, but I don't think that this needs any more than that. Sometimes simple is good. Again, whether you choose to stack your flowers, whether you choose to stack your centers, or whether you choose to just do something really simple, the sky is the limit. I hope you have a really good time working with the flower makers. They're a fun project, they're quick, they're easy, and they're very gratifying.